Hello and happy Friday. Welcome to this week's weekly live. This time from my hotel room in Beirut in Lebanon. I arrived here late last night and I won't lie, I am pretty tired, but I wanted to jump on here anyway and talk about the various recovery methods exactly because I am tired and because it is a good reminder to take rest when you need to. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, this is a really important topic because you can waste so much money with the wrong application of recovery methods, and you can achieve so much more if you employ the right recovery methods at the right time. So to preface that in the sense of today and then in the sense of how I'm feeling, the best recovery method is always going to be taking the appropriate amount of rest days and a good night's sleep. There is just like no recovery tool, no dietary tool or whatever in the world that can make up for good night's sleep and the right amount of training days. If you are training too many days in a row, never taking training days off, etc., you can use a Theragun gun and massage and whatever all you want. It's not going to make up for the fact that your body just needs a rest. So let's put that first. And same thing with sleep. If you're sleeping 5-6 hours or 5 hours on a regular basis, but you are investing a ton of time and money into recovery tools, it would just be better, also not just from a physical perspective, but mentally, if you simply prioritized sleep more. Anyway, now on to what you're probably expecting more, what this chat is going to be about, the individual recovery tools. And I want to start with two which can be very effective if applied in the correct way, and that is heat and cold exposure. So especially cold plunges have become very popular in the recent years. Like having a cold plunge in your backyard seems to be all the latest hype, and most gyms or functional gyms and so on are starting to implement more cold plunges as well. And every second influencer on Instagram and so on is kind of advertising that they're doing their cold showers, whatever. And there is certainly a place and time for that. The research is very clear. If you use it to the right extent, it can simply help your body get better at dealing with stress, and also it can very much bring inflammation from training down. However, here is the biggest mistake that a lot of people do. They train really hard and then they jump right away into the cold plunge, basically undoing some of the training stimulus that they have just set. So I know I've spoken about this before, but I just say it, I want to say it again because this is a mistake I do see very often. So you train, essentially what you're doing by that is, let's say you did 3 sets of 10 or whatever of everything, and then you're doing your cold exposure. Essentially, that's the same thing as just doing 2 sets of 10 for everything. So you have just trained too hard or very hard for no reason and undid a little bit of that. Essentially, how you use cold exposure in the right way is that you train really hard and then you do your cold exposure maybe 6-10 hours later in order to give your body a chance to actually adapt to the stimulus, to not blunt the stimulus. Or if you have overtrained, if you really notice, I pushed it too hard this time, I am so sore, like even if I touch my quads, that kind of hurts, or like you can hardly sit down on the toilet the next day after your leg day or whatever, then cold exposure is good because it will allow you to get back to training faster. Generally speaking, the only time that we want to employ cold exposure right after your training would be if you're in a competitive phase, if you need to make sure that you are sooner ready to go again But otherwise, give your body the chance to adapt to the training stimulus and employ a cold exposure 6 to 8 hours or something like that, or at least 3-4 hours after your actual training. So this is one of the biggest mistakes, and where you don't just waste the money on potentially going to like a cold bath, plunge, whatever thing, but also you just wasted a little time in your training and pushing yourself in your training. So you want to maximize that. Sauna also, we want to definitely not use it before your training. I mean, most people notice that it makes them sleepy, so that would be a very wrong application before your training and then like dragging yourself into your session. And also same thing, we don't necessarily want to do that right after your training, more not because it has a pro-inflammatory effect, which it doesn't, but more just it's interfering with the adaptations from your training. So therefore, something like sauna can be great in the evening, closer to bedtime, helping you relax. It's also going to help you sleep better and so on. So those are the two that I wanted to mention first, just because they are so popular at the moment and people talk about them, but also because they are very, very effective if you use them correctly. The next one, of course, that we often think about when it comes to recovery tools is massages. So what we want to consider with that very much so is, or what it depends on very much is the toughness and the kind of massage. Essentially, we need to ask ourselves, what are we actually trying to achieve? Because there is a difference, or with recovery tools. So there is a difference. We should differentiate between simply wanting our CNS to come down and therefore initiating recovery faster. This you can do in many different ways. Essentially, whichever way works for you, right? So there is no, breathing is so much better here, going for a walk is so much better there, etc. Whatever brings your CNS down after your training, that's gonna be a good method for you. So unlike the physical methods, like the sauna or the cold exposure, which we want to delay after training, we want to give your body a chance to adapt. We do want to bring your mind down right away. And there you can use any method that works for you. So for example, after your training, you might want to consider stretching for 3 to 5 minutes, but it's really not about the stretching. In fact, research shows that the stretching itself right after training doesn't really not have any positive effects on, like necessarily taking out a lot of the tonus out of the muscle, or getting any knots out or whatever. That's really not what it's about. And I'll talk about the knots more later on when I talk about Theragun or foam rolling. But anyway, we do want to bring our CNS down. So simply by stretching a few minutes, you might just focus on your breath and not touch your phone for a bit, and simply not just jump right back into your car straight after your training, right? So that's what it is about. And same thing with massages, or not same thing, but with massages, the thing is, it has been shown beneficial for recovery only in the sense that it can help you relax because you're laying there for 20-30 minutes doing nothing. And often also just the physical touch from another person. The massage itself isn't necessarily that beneficial according to research, especially, you might know that or from experience also know that there's a big difference whether it's like a deep tissue massage or whether it's like a little bit of a rub. So a little bit of a rub, we could easily do that right after your training because it doesn't, again, necessarily interfere with the physical adaptation. We don't want to break the muscle down even further. We don't want to, like if someone gives you a tough massage, that's essentially breaking down muscle tissue even more. And you have probably felt that too. If you've had a really hard sports massage, then probably you were even more sore the next day. So that shows you it is a physical adaptation. And if you get a massage like that, for example, to break down some knots or get tension out of the muscle, Then again, same as with the other physical adaptation, we want to do that later after your training. So, or on a rest day, for example, as well. Let's say you train in the morning, and then 5 p.m. could be a good time for a deep tissue massage if you know that the day after and the day after that you have 2 rest days coming up. That could be the perfect time, for instance. A soft, like a very mild massage right after your training is probably okay, but we don't want to interfere that much with the physical adaptation. And that brings me to foam rolling, which also used to be super popular for some time, has kind of like lost people's interest at the moment. But anyway, when it comes to foam rolling, if you and the purpose of the foam rolling, if you've been doing it right, you kind of find like a tight spot and you stay on there for a little bit to get rid of that knot. And that we don't want to do right after your training either. So, if you just roll on there a little bit and you do that more out of a relaxation, out of a calming down perspective, then yes, it's the right thing to do right after training. But if it's done in the sense of breaking down some knots, then again, do it further away from your training. Or this is actually something that might help you a little bit with mobility and so on throughout your training if you do it before the training. That is, the difference here is that unlike, let's just say, the cold exposure or whatever, or the sauna, it doesn't have an effect on your body temperature or on your nervous system in that sense, but it might just help you open up that range of motion a little bit. So let's say you have a squat day and you're doing some foam rolling on your calf and your hammies and so on. That could actually be beneficial beforehand, not right after if it's done in a tough way, because we don't want to break down the muscle tissue even further. I'm just looking down at my notes because I wanted to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. Oh yeah, and that brings me to the latest thing that is like super popular, and that is a Theragun. I have played around with a Theragun a couple of times. It can be incredibly painful. I don't know if you've ever experienced or had any experiences with a Theragun. I love it because, of course, if you're on your own, like, it helps you get into spots that you normally can't so well. I usually, like when I'm at home, I have like a golf ball and stuff like that for getting in between my shoulder blades or even my glutes, but the Theragun is definitely a whole different level. It can be super painful, in a good way. But again, this is why we don't want to do it right after training. You don't want to break the muscle tissue down even further. And because it is so aggressive, I actually also wouldn't do it right before your training. Just for the same reason, like it's going to interfere with your muscles. So further away from your training, if you train in the morning, do it in the evening or afternoon, or if you have an evening training, maybe the next day, a couple of hours or so at least, if not more, before your training. So you actually feel your muscle in a normal sense and not broken down when you're trying to train hard and push it. Then going further from that, or touching back on the ball. So essentially, I mean, a golf ball and a Theragun technically are meant to be doing the same thing as a deep massage. You get into those tight spots. And whichever method you choose, according to your budget and wherever you are, is totally up to you and your personal preference. What I should have probably prefaced as well, and if you saw my Instagram post yesterday, is that regularity really, or consistency, like with everything, is going to help so much more. So, if you do 3-5 minutes with one of those golf balls and so on every day, or even 2-3 times a week for 20 minutes, it's probably going to be more beneficial than if you get a massage every blue moon. But again, anything is usually better than nothing. So think about your time and just your money as well, because what is 3-5 minutes a day, right? So what could that look like? Or I'll tell you what my regular mobility practice looks like is essentially, you know, before my workout or as I have warmed up, gone through my like generic warm up kind of thing, I do a few mobilization exercises. I wouldn't do any static stretching during that time, and I certainly don't want to bring my CNS down during that time. I want to activate it. So because of that, no like deep breathing or whatever at that time. That would be absolutely the wrong time. But then after my training, like I do try to take a few minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, just doing a few stretches, mostly, once again, mostly for the CNS effect, so that I don't just like jump right back into my day-to-day stuff and my work or whatever, but instead calming down, taking a few deep breaths, thinking about how is this body part that I just trained feeling, and so on. So 2-3 minutes mobilization prior, 2-3 minutes stretching, calming down afterwards, and then every evening for 20 minutes, as I have finished my workday and so on, I usually do block and golf ball mobilization. Block mobilization, it's not something that everybody needs to do or that I'm like highly advocating or telling people, wow, you know, this is, you need to pick this up. It's not really that well known. I have been introduced to this by my mentor, and it's worked really well for me because I used to tend to have like quite tight shoulders, like hunched forward as well, and lower back pain. And I'll show you in a minute what that looks like actually, like with the block work. But anyway, 20 minutes basically just on the floor doing something. Some days it might also just be some more relaxing stretching, some rolling on a golf ball, some rolling on a foam roller. I personally do not incorporate cold exposure as much as I would like to, mostly because I don't have like one consistent spot where I am all the time. And of course, if I really made it a priority, I'd probably be able to find some close by. But anyway, I don't do that often. Also, because generally speaking, I am someone, I get stressed out very easily. So I actually need to see that I manage my stress better. So if you're someone who's like constantly highly stressed or has high stress levels, additional cold exposure could make that worse. Whereas I find my body does better with heat exposure. So for example, saunas and stuff like that, I should probably incorporate that more often than I would do cold exposure. So that could be something like 2-3 times a week or so would probably be ideal. But for me, the thing that I can stay consistent with is the 20 minutes at the end of my day. That kind of also initiates my recovery, my wind down process. And yeah, like I said, it can be foam rolling, it can be a golf ball, or it can be with this block here. And again, I don't want to necessarily like push this or whatever, but I'm just sharing that with you because many of you are always interested in what I do, and I've been doing that pretty consistently for like 2 years. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Let's see if I can put you here somewhere on my hotel room bed or floor, perhaps. So I'm simply placing this block here on the floor, and then I often just put it essentially where my bra line is, and I lay down like this. This looks really uncomfortable in this video, I'm well aware of that, but what it actually does is it opens up my chest. And if you start out, like if this is something that you ever want to give a try and you have 2 blocks, you could put a different block under here, and essentially making it not quite as extreme at first. But I just lay here like this for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then I take it out, and then I use it for my lower back as well. And this is going to look even more strange. But I place it under, essentially on my sacrum, so under my lower back. This is not in my lower back curvature, not here, I'm not making my lumbar spine even more curved, but I'm placing it a little bit lower, and then laying like this. And this looks weird too, but anyway, what that does is it stretches out my hip flexors, and at the same time it actually takes pressure out of my lower back. So anyway, again, and I'll stay here for like 5 to 10 minutes too. But as I said, I don't necessarily share that often because it's not like something where I'm like, oh, everybody needs to be doing this. And it's not a very well-known tool, but it's just one way that works with recovery for me. And essentially that's, as I said, what it comes down to: something that you enjoy doing, something that feels good for you and your body, something that you can do consistently. So I'd just like to invite you to generally think more about your recovery aside from sleep and taking full days off. As I mentioned in the beginning, those are really the two biggest ones. But if you have any questions about this, about the block work, or just in general what I said, then please feel free to comment or to send me a message. And I do hope you have a wonderful Friday, wonderful start to your weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I shall talk to you soon.